What's going on in the Big East, from records breaking by Maddie Siegrist to UConn losing 2 games in a row, and what's up with Georgetown? T. Baker, Big East writer at The Next, joins host Natalie Heavren to discuss all things Big East.
Ogunbowale for the win.
You are Locked On Women's Basketball, your daily podcast on women's basketball.
Hello and happy Friday. We made it to the end of the week. You are locked on to women's basketball. I'm Natalie Heavren, and I'm a features writer and the Atlantic 10 beat reporter for The Next. Thank you for making Locked On Women's Basketball your first listen every day. And remember, Locked On Women's Basketball is free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. Today, we'll be chatting all things Big East from Maddie Siegrist, what's up with UConn, and what to watch for in the upcoming matchup between Villanova and UConn on Saturday, and also a little bit about Georgetown. So joining me today is T. Baker, Big East reporter and WBL writer at The Next. Starting off, T, it's been 6 weeks since you last joined me on the podcast, and oh boy, a lot has happened since then. On January 6th, you told me that Maddie Siegrist was not only your favorite player to watch in the conference so far this season, but that she was on track to become Villanova's all-time leading scorer. Tell me what she's done since then.
Thanks, Natalie. Good to be here today. I always love jumping on the pod with you, talking Big East hoops. So Maddie Siegrist has really exceeded our expectations from last time, I would say. So not only has she broken the Villanova basketball, men's or women's scoring record, but she's also broken the Big East women's basketball scoring record. And she did it in typical Maddie Siegrist fashion, scoring 50 points and breaking the Villanova single game scoring record at the same time. So she did that against Seton Hall just last week, and she is really just continuing to elevate her game somehow. When we talked 6 weeks ago, I talked about how over the summer she had elevated her game 3-on-3 play, but she's found ways to just continue to get better. And, you know, I think she's definitely firmly in my National Player of the Year conversation, and also her WNBA draft stock is rising. I saw her on a recent WNBA draft board up as high as 4 as a pick. So she's got the talent to take it to the next level and to really bring Villanova a pretty significant run this season.
And what does that mean to have, at a program that's not UConn, a player with such high WNBA draft stock? And what does that mean for the Big East as a whole?
It's huge. I mean, I've been reading a lot of chatter on Twitter about how, Maddie Siegrist, if she had gotten more of the national coverage that maybe Caitlin Clark, Aaliyah Boston, others who are in the National Player of the Year contention got, she'd be in that conversation more firmly. I think the Big East, some of the more under the radar schools like Villanova don't always get the media attention they deserve. And really Maddie Siegrist having that level of talent at the Big East. I talked about this with you last time. Talent begets talent. So the more talented players you have in this conference, the more players that are going to show up, and not just go to UConn, but go to Villanova, go to Creighton, go to DePaul, and really make this as well-rounded as a conference as it's been in decades.
Yeah, and I know we talked offline about a recent article from Russell Steinberg, friend of The Next, about why Maddie Siegrist gets lost in the Player of the Year shuffle. And Russ wrote about that part of it is because some Big East games are available on Flow Hoops or not available as broadly nationally on Fox Sports as some of the other major conferences you talked about.
Yeah, and I think it's also the way she plays her game. It's understated. She can just kill you slowly, kind of. She can rack up points in a hurry. She doesn't have the maybe logo 3, flashy game that Caitlin Clark has, or the ability to just dominate in the post that Aaliyah has that make them both really visible stars. But she can quietly assassinate opponents, and she does it every night. And I think that puts her in the category of player of the year. I mean, she's the leading scorer in the country. So that in of itself is a stat that puts her above the rest.
And how does having her on the team make Villanova a difficult team to play?
It makes them so difficult because you have to focus your defensive intensity on Maddie Siegrist, and she's not the only player on the court. So, she can really rack up points in a hurry. She can find her shot on any point in the court. She's a tall wing, so she can pull down rebounds. She is all over the court, and she takes the attention from an opposing defense in a way that makes it really difficult to play 5-on-5 basketball against also other talented players on Villanova.
And she's not the only one on the team that can produce. The next, Kobe Mosley, recently wrote about Lucy Olson and Christina Dulce. Tell me about how they've been making an impact this season.
Yeah, well, first, both Christina and Lucy are sophomores, so this is a really promising sign for Villanova. As we know, Maddie's on her way out to the WNBA, but having two talented stars in the wings is really good for Denise Dillon and the Wildcats, because this is going to be a program that's going to continue to get better, continue to put good players out on the floor. And I think as it goes for Lucy, she's a great scorer. She's the one who can kind of complement Maddie most in the scoring column, but she's also a really solid guard. She doesn't produce a lot of turnovers. She can find her teammates. She's got an ability to find teammates in the open court. And for Christina, I mean, she's been huge for the Wildcats on the defensive end. They need that defensive intensity as well. And Siegrist recently called out her teammates, saying she's unbelievable on defensive end, grown up so much between freshman and sophomore year. So again, those two players, it speaks to the well-roundedness of the Wildcats, not just this season, but moving forward, as having two really talented sophomores in the mix.
And, how has their performance this season made Villanova a more competitive team in the Big East? It's not just Maddie, it's a whole team that's making it competitive.
Yeah, I mean, I think since last season, that well-roundedness has become more evident. Like, seeing players like Lucy Olson, she was talented last year. You could, remember when you saw her on the court, but this season she's able to make more of a presence on the court, and that just makes them a better, more threatening team. I think that, right now they sit just behind UConn, and they have a matchup on Saturday that we're going to talk a little bit about. So they have a chance to, tie for the Big East title this season, or take it, depending on things shake out the rest of the season. And right now, they are right in the AP Top 25 poll, their highest ranking of the season. So they're peaking at the right moment, and they have all the pieces together to make a big run in the Big East tournament and also in the NCAA tournament.
So in your mind, we've talked about where Villanova stands in the Big East right now. What do they have to do to continue to prove to non-Big East fans or non-Big East loyals that they're not just UConn's little sister, that they are a top team, not only in the Big East, but in the country?
I think they need to continue to win big games. Last season, they were the first team to defeat UConn in a conference game in about 10 years. So being at that game, you saw the sort of joy in their players and their coaches. Beating UConn is still a big deal. And so doing that consistently, I think will kind of begin to shape a rivalry in the Big East that allows them to be seen as not just, the team that can almost beat UConn or beat them every once in a while, but that consistently has the talent and the consistency and the work ethic to beat a team like UConn. And I think they're on their way there. Like I said, Maddie Siegrist has been this catalyst for them and really into a national conversation, but they got talent. Denise Dillon is a great recruiter, and I have no doubt that they'll continue on an upward trajectory.
Well, we love rivalries over here at The Next. Love watching rivalry games. So coming up next, we'll discuss Villanova's upcoming game against UConn and what's been going on with the Huskies this season. Today's episode is brought to you by Nissan. Nissan's Most Electric Player of the Week is brought to you by the all-new, all-electric 2023 Nissan Ariya. This week's Player of the Week should come to no surprise. Maddie Siegrist. Last Saturday, she had 50 points, and on Wednesday night, the Poughkeepsie native had 39 at St. John's, 2 incredibly electric performances. And much like the Nissan Aria, Siegrist is brilliantly fierce, and she leads the country in scoring this season, averaging more than 29 points per game. Siegrist, like the Aria, delivers on duality, and the vehicle is the perfect combination of fierceness and elegance. Beautiful but strong, the perfect SUV crossover. The 2023 Nissan Aria packs pin-to-ear seat power and premium intelligence all-in-one EV. The all-new, all-electric 2023 Nissan Aria is the EV for people who love to drive. Shop now at nissanusa.com. So before we talk about UConn and Villanova's matchup on Saturday, February 18th, we have to talk a little bit about UConn. So last week, they lost 2 consecutive games for the first time since March of 1993. And to talk about how long that's about 18 months before my parents met and a little over 5 years before I was born. So not something that obviously has happened in a really long time. The Huskies lost to South Carolina on February 5th and then Marquette on February 8th and struggled early against Georgetown on February 11th. So T, what's been going on with UConn?
Yeah, and I think after that back-to-back loss situation, it felt like the state of Connecticut was going to declare a state of emergency or something like that. It's not something that happens a lot. And I was 1 year old when they last lost. I think that when they last lost, consecutive games, and it's a ridiculous record. Like, that's a ridiculous thing to have as a standard. So I look back at those records and just have to be grateful and admire the greatness that is UConn women's basketball. It's a brand, it is a dynasty, and it is, the model for women's basketball around the country. It's the standard upon which others have created their program. So to have a record like that, it's one of those things that's only a problem for UConn fans to be upset about something like that. And I just have to look back at all the great players that have been part of that incredible run. And, it's a testament to the fact that they're playing, pretty shorthanded this season. They are largely fielding a 6 to 7 person rotation in games, and they don't have backup. It's not that Gino's not playing the bench, it's that there is no bench to be played. So they're having to really dig down deep, and you could see the exhaustion after that close South Carolina game. They played so tightly in the following game against Marquette, and Marquette is no easy team to play. I wrote up an article on the Next just last week about how you can't sleep on this Marquette program. They have a great coach. They've got really great senior leadership, and they play a style of basketball that is, aggressive, that is able to knock down shots in a hurry. And I'm not surprised that UConn's fumbled against a team like Marquette on the road. So I would say that, the shorthanded nature of the Huskies right now is really becoming evident in this stretch of the season. And that's contributed to those back-to-back losses and how they've had a lot of close games recently.
And what, if anything, has changed for the Huskies in the last 6 days? Caroline Ducharme is coming back. Are things looking up for the Huskies?
I think they are. Caroline Ducharme is a really important presence for the Huskies because she allows them to space out the floor. I was at that the Creighton game on Wednesday when UConn pulled out a 2-point victory against the Blue Jays, and it was really impressive to see Caroline Ducharme score all of her 10 points in the fourth quarter, including the game-winning free throws. And she is just a scrappy player. Gino talked about how there's no player who wants to play more than Caroline, and that she has the ability to offer another point position, another guard position for the Huskies that allows defenses to have to react to both guards like Lou Lopez Seneschal, who's a great shooter, and Caroline Ducharme on the perimeter, while also navigating 2 bigs in Dorka Juhas and Aaliyah Boston in the paint. So traditionally, UConn this season has been pretty shorthanded at the guard position, and having someone like Caroline Ducharme allows them to space the floor, allows them to take more threes per game, and that's something they've really needed desperately in this past stretch of the season.
Yeah, Gino talked about after the Georgetown game that they really only have 1.5 ball handlers. So definitely good for UConn to have another guard back in the mix. What weaknesses have they shown in the last 2 weeks?
I think that for them, their weaknesses are on the offensive end. Defense, tends to still be a strength for the Huskies. They can just really hold a team accountable and really just shut them down, honestly, on the defensive end. That's always kind of been the brand for the Huskies. I think on the offensive end, sometimes they just get really stagnant. In the third quarter of the game against Creighton, they went 5 minutes at the beginning of the third quarter without scoring a point. And finally, Dork Juhas hit a three that allowed all the Husky fans to sit down because they stand clapping until that first point. But they need to not be standing around on offense. They need to create offense. And I think if anything is their weakness, it's going to be on the offensive end. They need to be able to put up points. They need to be able to put up points from different places on the floor, and they need to be able to do it consistently. And I think that's been the biggest weakness this season. And I think some of it's just not having a deep enough rotation to have different types of shooters and different types of rotations on the floor. And I think that's going to be their biggest challenge in the postseason.
So obviously they can't just magically fix the health of a lot of their players. But what is left for the Huskies to do to help adapt or change going into the Big East and NCAA tournaments coming up?
Yeah, I think it's finding comfort with rotations. Caroline Ducharme was able to be the hero the other night, but working her into the rotation and figuring out the minutes that she's going to be able to play, how to get rest for other guards, how to work players like Ayanna Patterson and Amari DeBerry into the lineup to give the bigs some rest. I think Gino and the Huskies have always ran a pretty tight rotation, a pretty small number of people playing the game. And I think finding ways to build in others into the rotation, especially in the postseason, the grind that is playing, 2 games in 3 days and against the toughest competition in the country, I think they're going to have to figure out how to get those rotations a little tighter, how to practice having Caroline back on the floor. And let's see, maybe AZ Fudd is going to come back, and also how to work her into the rotation.
And next up for the Huskies is traveling to Villanova for Saturday's game. What are you looking for in the matchup?
I'm looking for just a really good game. These are the 2 best teams in the Big East. They have talent. It's an opportunity for Maddie Siegrist to shine on a national stage. And I'm looking for a team in UConn that is continuing to work out its rotation, and that's going to have to work on shutting down Maddie Siegrist. I don't think any team has done that well. And I'm just looking for a game between the 2 powerhouses of the Big East that's really going to decide who's going to be the number 1 team in the Big East this season and who's going to go into the tournament with that momentum.
And for you, what are the keys to the game for UConn to pull out a win?
I think, Gino, after the Creighton game, UConn head coach Gino Auriemma did joke that keeping Maddie Siegrist under 40 points or 45 points would be the key to the game. And I think, that's important to note that, a big part of their game is scouting Maddie Siegrist and shutting her down on the defensive end. I think they're also going to have to hit threes. Villanova is a team that has some perimeter shooters, and with UConn's short rotation and lack of depth, they can't just grind out every single possession in the post and expect to beat a team like Villanova. So they have to find ways to take threes, find themselves open on the court to take threes, and also make those threes. And I think those will be the keys to the game against Villanova.
And then on the other side, what are the keys for Villanova, and how can they exploit the weaknesses that UConn has showed this month?
I think some of the keys for them are leaning into home court advantage. It's important, that this game, to note that this game is on Villanova's court. They're doing a whiteout game. They're trying to get people out there to that arena to really show up for the Wildcats. I think it's also about, finding ways to get the Huskies in foul trouble. Driving the ball in the post. Maddie Siegrist has an ability to find her shot in the post, but also on the perimeter. And if she's driving to the basket, UConn's going to have to either defend her, foul her, or let her make a shot. So I think that ultimately finding ways to shut her down and ultimately Villanova is going to have to find a way to get the Huskies in foul trouble and just play their brand of basketball, which is, a motion offense that gets some good inside-outside action. And I think ultimately it's going to be a really tightly tightly tied match. It's going to be close, and it's going to be a good battle.
I am so excited to watch it. Might have to have it on a second screen. I'll be at a different game, but definitely excited to keep an eye on it. Coming up next, we'll talk about Georgetown, what they showed against UConn, and what to expect in the future. Today's episode is brought to you by Built Bar. Are you looking for a delicious treat that is still loaded with protein? Then you have to try Built Bar. We at Locked On Women's Basketball love Built Bar, especially because they are both healthy and tasty. Seriously, they're so delicious, you won't think they're good for you. But what makes Built Bars so good? Well, for starters, they're covered in 100% real chocolate. That's right, real chocolate. Who doesn't love chocolate? And they also come in unbelievable flavors like churro, peanut butter brownie, and coconut almond. Not sure how Built does it, but these bars taste like a candy bar while maintaining amazing macros. What's even better is they have 4 grams of sugar and 17 grams of protein. And now you don't need to wait around to get a box. Not only can you buy them at Built.com, you can have them shipped to you, and you can get them at your local Walmart or Sam's Club. That's right. Head to your nearest Walmart today, walk to the pharmacy section, and grab yourself a box of Built Bars. You can pick up a 4-bar box of cookies and cream, double chocolate, or coconut puffs. And if you're close to Sam's Club, run in, grab a 13-bar box with hit flavors like brownie batter and churro. You can thank me later. So I made my way to DC last weekend for UConn versus Georgetown, and before the game had ended, I messaged you about one player for the Hoyas, Kennedy Fauntleroy. Starting off, how has she impressed you so far this season?
Yeah, well, first, love that you got to catch some Big East basketball in person. So glad to hear that we had next representation at that game. She is a player who is, I think, living up to her billing as a top recruit. She was ranked number 74 overall by ESPN Hoop Girls coming in, number 17 at her position. She was a 2-year captain and a starter at the New Hope Academy in Maryland, and she was also the Maryland Player of the Year last season. So I don't think it's surprising that she's come in and made some noise in the Big East. She's someone who has a versatile game, and it's only going to grow. I think it's a really promising sign for the Hoyas that they have a player in Kennedy who's able to come in as a freshman and make a splash, who's only going to develop in her next few years with the school.
Yeah, I couldn't believe she was a freshman. I was watching her. She, I think she led both teams in scoring by the end of the first quarter, and I looked down and was like, freshman? So she definitely impressed me. But what do you expect to see from her in the future, in the next few years at Georgetown?
I expect her to continue to grow her game. I think Georgetown's coach, Howard, is really good at developing players. He has a resume of making this Georgetown team, better in his tenure. So I see someone who's going to continue to elevate her game. And I think players coming up now through high school just have such a versatile skill set. We're seeing so much more depth and talent in players coming out of high school. So I think a lot of ways her game is also going to develop in ways we haven't seen before on the women's side. How is she going to be able to produce her own offense? What's her defensive intensity going to be like getting more comfortable at the college level? So I just continue to see a player who's going to, maybe make a all Big East first team in her tenure, and make a run to be a player on a Georgetown team that I think is on the rise, that in her next few seasons, again, talent begets talent. More good players at a program bring in more good players. So I think she's also going to be an anchor for them to get other or highly touted recruits that really make Georgetown a contender for years to come.
And what have you seen from Georgetown this season, and what do you see James Howard building?
Yeah, I think they've stumbled a little bit. They're 5-12 in the Big East this season, but I don't think that that speaks to the quality of play on the court. They lost to UConn by just under 10 points. They have a team that I think has potential to surprise some folks come Big East tournament weekend. And in terms of what James Howard's building, he is a coach. He started coaching Georgetown in 2017. He's brought the team to the WNIT in consecutive seasons in the past. And I think he wants to play at that level. He wants a team that can get to the postseason and do well. So I think he's building a team that can work its way up from sort of the bottom tier of the Big East and become a contender in the conference play, but also become a contender nationally. While they are 5-12 this season, they're just under 500 overall. So they've had pretty good season. They've been able to take the good with the bad. And I think that Coach James Howard is the type of coach, that players want to play for, and that can elevate this Georgetown program.
So thank you for joining me today, T. Where can the people find you and your awesome coverage of the Big East?
Yeah, thanks for having me. Always good to chat. Folks can find me at MXT Baker. That's TEE Baker. And that's where you can find me on Twitter. And I will be writing some stories coming up about the Big East. We got the Big East tournament coming up that first weekend in March. So expect a lot from me then while these teams get together at Mohegan Sun Arena to compete for the title.
I am so excited to see what you have up your sleeve and we'll be writing next. Thank you to our listeners for making Locked On Women's Basketball your first listen today. Make sure to tune back in tomorrow to hear more from Hunter and Em, who always teach me so much. Now, make your second listen Game to Game NBA. Every moment, every top performance, every result. Locked On Game to Game covers every game from across the NBA with local analysis that only Locked On can deliver. Follow Game to Game on Locked On NBA, available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts.